Today we are going to explore the geologic wonder Kamiak Butte just north of Pullman, Washington. Kamiak Butte is one of very few places untouched by the agriculture industry that dominates the Palouse. Let's explore why that is, how the butte came to be, and the ecosystems that represent it. Kamiak Butte is a unique feature of the Palouse Prairie, jutting up out of wheat fields far above. Much of the butte is privately owned land not open to visitation, but some is owned by Whitman County and is open to the public as Kamiak Butte County Park. To understand why Kamiak Butte has been able to escape agricultural influence and act as a sanctuary for species that once dominated the prairie, we must understand the rich geologic history of both the modern-day Palouse and what it looked like 200 million years ago. "200 million years ago, supercontinent Pangaea had already begun to differentiate through tectonic movements. The North American plate pushed away from the landmass and over millions of years formed a continent that closely resembles the one we see today. Up until around 50 million years ago, what we now call Washington State was underwater. Around this time, the oceanic Juan de Fuca plate started to push against the North American continental plate. The higher density of the oceanic plate caused it to subduct underneath the continental plate, pushing the Pacific West upwards and breaching the ocean's surface. This process of subduction caused massive pressure to build between the two plates, and basalt magma started collecting under the Yellowstone plume head. 17 million years ago, it erupted from the surface, continuing for the next 11 million years. This magma eventually cooled into the flood basalts we see today. 2.6 million years ago, the Ice Age started, with massive glaciers dragging over the surface of the Palouse. Blocking the Clark Fork River in modern-day Idaho and Montana laid a 3,000-foot thick glacier. About 11,000 years ago, the climate had warmed enough for glacial melting to occur, but this glacier wasn't catching on. Water collected until ancient Lake Missoula was formed, at which point the glacier began to float and water burst forth, pulverizing anything in its path. This water carried with it less soil but settled on top of the basalt of the Palouse. This rich soil is what makes the Palouse so fertile for crop growth. Kamiak Butte is differentiated from the rest of the Palouse by its mineral makeup. When Washington first reached the surface of the ocean, its substrate was quartzite sand. By the time the basalt magma we discussed earlier cooled into solid rock, most of the quartzite sand that once covered the surface of the Palouse was buried under feet of flood basalt. Kamiak Butte is an exception to the rule. The quartzite sand here was tall enough to avoid being drowned in basalt. Over time, the sand hardened into rock, forming the Kamiak Butte we see today. Basalt is a non-porous mineral. This is a primary reason as to why the Palouse is so famous for its wheat production. The bedrock the lush soil stands on contributes to its fertility. The same cannot be said for Kamiak Butte, and this is why its natural flora and fauna has been so beautifully preserved over the years. Quartzite is porous. When water is taken into the soil, the quartzite will absorb it as it drains down. Because of this, agricultural crops that necessitate frequent watering and fertilization simply cannot thrive on Kamiak Butte, meaning farming is pointless and preserving the natural flora makes more sense. We now understand why Kamiak Butte is a sanctuary for native plant species, and now we will explore this further by talking about the climate at the butte. The macroclimate of Kamiak Butte in Washington state falls under the label of marine modified continental. This macroclimate can be defined by low temperature variability and plentiful precipitation as a result of its close proximity to the Pacific Ocean. There are a multitude of factors that influence the climate of Kamiak Butte. Three of the most important are continentality, topography, and air masses. Continentality is the distance from a location to an ocean and how landmass influences climate. The impact of continentality increases as land moves inward from the coast, with coastal land areas having very little continental influence on climate. When an area has high continentality, its climate and temperatures are regulated primarily or exclusively by the landmass that surrounds it. Because Kamiak Butte is not close to the coast, it has high continentality. Topography is the configuration of the land. It encompasses all geographic features that make up the land, such as mountains, hills, and valleys, among others. Landforms of particular importance to climate are mountains. Mountains serve as a topographic barrier for marine air masses. On Kamiak Butte, the Cascade Mountains and the Rocky Mountains are both important topographic barriers. Air masses are giant bodies of air that can stretch for hundreds of miles and share consistent temperatures and characteristics. In North America, there are four air masses of influence: continental polar, continental tropical, marine polar, and marine tropical. The air mass affecting Kamiak Butte is marine polar air. This air mass is cool and moist and finds its origins in continental Asia, where it then travels over the Pacific, being modified by the ocean as it does. On the northern side of the butte, tall coniferous trees tower far above in their competition for sunlight. In contrast, the southern side can be identified by a few sparsely grouped trees as well as lots of grass and wildflowers that wouldn't otherwise survive in the woodlands on the north side. This biome that Kamiak Butte is known for is called the Western Interior Shrublands and Woodlands biome. This biome occurs in patches through the Rocky Mountains as far south as small areas of Mexico and is found as far north as Yukon Territory in Canada. Hot, dry summers and mild, rainy winters are typical for this biome. Due to high summer wildfire risks, many plants in this biome are fire and drought resistant. The plants found in this biome are trees, shrubs, and grasses. The shrubland aspect of this biome is populated by perennial grasses and woody shrubs. Hardy conifer trees and understory vegetation dominate the woodlands aspect of this biome. What makes Kamiak Butte worth talking about is the stark differences between the south-facing and north-facing aspects. To understand and digest these differences, let's take a look at abiotic factors in plant life for both the north and south side of the butte. Taking a day off to visit Kamiak Butte County Park, you will find yourself starting a hike at the foot of the northern aspect of the butte. Abiotic factors that impact the northern side of Kamiak Butte are its moister soils and cooler temperatures. These are a result of the amount of solar radiation absorbed by the northern side and limits what plant species thrive there. The first difference you'll notice between the north and south sides of the butte is the dense tree coverage of the northern side. The northern side of Kamiak Butte is home to a number of coniferous tree species. Among these species we see ponderosa pine, western larch, and Douglas fir. Using data from tree plots studied on the north side, it's estimated that the northern aspect of Kamiak Butte contains 130 trees per acre, consisting of 71% Douglas fir, 14% ponderosa pine, and 14% western larch. The woodlands of the northern side of Kamiak Butte allow for the growth of a successful understory of shrubs. Common shrub species include ocean spray and ninebark. Lichen is very common in clumps on conifer trees and the barren winter branches of shrubs. The south side of the butte is different in a number of ways from the north. Unlike the cool, moist northern aspect of the butte, the southern side is subject to more solar radiation and as a result has drier soils and warmer temperatures. You will also notice it is covered in quartzite erratics. While trees are present on the south side, they exist in small spaced-out patches. The only tree species that can survive the fire-prone, wind-buffeted south side of Kamiak Butte is the ponderosa pine. Using data from tree plots studied on the south side, it's estimated that the southern aspect of Kamiak Butte contains 35 trees per acre, and as previously mentioned, is 100% ponderosa pine. In direct contrast to the north, the south side is covered in perennial grasses. The dominating native species of grass here is Idaho fescue, but invasive North African grass is common as well. Shrubs are present, but like trees, spread out in small clumps. Other common plants here include a variety of colorful and easily identifiable wildflowers. The sun-exposed surface of the south side provides these colorful flowers with the conditions they need to grow that they wouldn't find so easily on the north aspect. We've talked about the geology, climate, and biome of Kamiak Butte, as well as the plants that thrive there as a result. The last important facet of our discussion today is to talk about common wildlife at the Butte. The Butte is home to 130 species of birds, 170 species of plants, and more than 30 species of mammals of all shapes and sizes. Today we will choose to focus on a few common mammals at the Butte. Easily recognizable by their slender bills, large ears, and the presence of antlers on males, deer are a staple mammal of the Pacific Northwest. Two species of deer are found on Kamiak Butte, the white-tailed deer and the mule deer. White-tailed deer are identified by their white markings on the face and neck, white underside, and wide brown tail with a white underside. Mule deer are darker and grayer as well as larger than their white-tailed counterparts. The easiest way to identify a mule deer is its thin and droopy white tail with a black tip. Both mule deer and white-tailed deer are generalist herbivores, feeding on many flowers, grasses, and shrubs. The north aspect of the Butte provides a dense tree coverage and a variety of leafy shrubs for deer to browse on. While deer can eat hundreds of plants, they are discerning in what they eat and will pursue the most nutritious option available to them. Elk are much larger than deer. They have dark coats, but their side and flanks are a contrasting light beige. Unlike deer, elk prefer to graze on grass over actively browsing shrubs and dense forest. Because of this, elk on Kamiak Butte are most likely to be found on the southern aspect of the butte or grazing in the private fields below. The final ungulate found on Kamiak Butte is the moose. The specific subspecies is the Shirasi moose or the Shiras moose. They're similar to deer in their dietary preferences and are heavily inclined towards woody shrubs, bark, and leaves. These dietary preferences would place moose on the northern aspect of Kamiak Butte where trees and woody shrubs are plentiful. Human disturbance on Kamiak Butte has the potential to lead to extremely dangerous human-wildlife contact. The porcupine finds its home among the trees. For slow-moving animals like the porcupine, the ability to nest above ground is advantageous, placing them out of reach of predators like coyotes who cannot climb trees. Porcupines are nocturnal and spend their time actively foraging on the ground. This time is when they're most vulnerable to predation. They're herbivores. In the summer, they eat leaves, twigs, and seeds. When winter comes and food is scarce, they will instead rely on the needles of conifer trees and eat away the bark on trees to reach the inner cambium. Coyotes can thrive in just about every habitat, but the forested northern aspect and grassy southern aspect of the butte is an ideal location for them. With access to both well-covered forest and open grassy areas, the butte provides options for coyotes without forcing them to travel long distances. They're primarily carnivores but are known to eat berries and plants in the winter. Their main source of prey is small rodents like rats, mice, and squirrels. When pack hunting, coyotes can take down bigger prey like deer and elk cows. Today we went on a short exploration of the geology, climate, biome, plant life, and wildlife of Kamiak Butte. If we had more time, we could delve even further into these topics, but this brief overview hopefully provided a deeper explanation of this wonder of the Palouse. Thank you for watching.